Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. As we bring an end to the month of April, we are joined this week by football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive with his thoughts on the NFL draft and much more. For that, let's get started as we always do with a few of my thoughts. A reminder that we will be on our summer schedule starting in May, which is 2 shows a month until August. It's time to sort of kick back and enjoy some downtime, which I think we all deserve now that life is ever so slowly returning to normal. In August, we will return to our weekly schedule as we get ready for the start of another football season. It will be here soon enough, so make a note that our next show will be on May 12th. Tonight, the NFL draft gets underway in Cleveland, and Michigan has 11 draft-eligible players. How many will hear their names called? My guest today says 6 or 7 would be his guess. Up next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive to discuss that and much more on this week's edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment is football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. It's been a while, Aaron. I think the last time we chatted was during the season, so it's great to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back, Mike. Spring practice just wrapped up, and we're hitting the dog days, I guess you could say, of the off season, where we're not going to get a ton of info, but we kind of get to look forward to or anticipate the fall season.
That's right. This time it's the 3 or 4, well, actually about 4 months of wondering what's going to happen, but it will unfold soon enough. But right now our attention is on the NFL draft. That gets underway tonight from Cleveland. We're taping this on Thursday morning. And after last year's virtual draft, we're back to a more traditional setting, which is just another step back towards normal, isn't it, Aaron?
Exactly. Yeah, last year the draft was supposed to be held in Las Vegas. That obviously got axed because of the coronavirus pandemic. But they're back on the road this year. They're in Cleveland, Ohio, so not too far down the road. And several Michigan prospects are eligible. I think 10 is the total number, and it wouldn't surprise me if they hit that 6 or 7 number by the end of the weekend.
Well, as you said, 10, some say 11 draft eligible players, of course led by Kwity Paye, and he seems to be, at least right now, first round lock, doesn't he, Aaron?
Yeah, in fact, the latest mock this morning from ESPN's Todd McShay has him going as high as 11, and I think that's as high as I've seen him on most. But yeah, most folks think he's going to go first round. I think it's pretty safe to say he's ranked, I think, at this point as one of the top defensive ends available. It looks like we're going to see a glut of quarterbacks and receivers and offensive players taken early, as we usually do. But Paye, I would not be surprised if he's one of the first probably 2 or 3 defensive guys off the board. He's got a high upside, and I think that's what folks like most about him. For his size, he's 6'1", 261. He moves very well. He's quick. He's athletic. He can jump. And a lot of NFL teams kind of salivate at that. Now, his production levels, I think, left a little bit to be desired during his time at Michigan. 11.5 sacks over 3 years, 20 starts. I think some teams might have, wanted to see a little bit more out of him. But that could be, some criticism leveled at the Michigan staff and just in the reality of how they utilized him. Either way, he's a top prospect. He's someone that I think NFL teams really like. He's a smart kid. He's a really nice guy. In fact, I'd put him probably top 5 of athletes I've covered during my career. He's a really nice guy. Well spoken. He'll go out of his way to accommodate interviews. So yeah, expect to see him taken for tonight, first round. Looks like anywhere from probably 11 to 20, 25.
Is he one of the guys, Aaron, that stock went up after the season ended, or he's going to go just about where everyone thought he was?
I'd say it's about where folks thought. I did think it helped that he came back and at least showed a little bit of something, that he just didn't opt out of the season and get ready to prepare for the draft. I think that spoke volumes to his character. And that's not to besmirch anyone who opted out, but I think that goes a long way in the minds of some scouts and NFL personnel. He didn't play a ton this year. As we go back and look at the stats, only ended up playing a couple of games before he suffered an injury and just kind of decided to sit the rest of it out. But yeah, I don't think it hurt him, but I don't necessarily think it helped him either. But he had a really productive 2019 season. I think that's what most scouts are looking at this point. They liked what he was able to do that year. He has enough starts under his belt and experience that I think most teams at this point probably feel pretty comfortable taking him.
You mentioned this week in MLive that Jalen Mayfield might sneak into the first round. Some folks are saying that. Has his stock been on the rise the last few months?
His might have dropped a little. I can remember, this time last year, maybe last fall, he was starting to pop up on first-round mock boards. It was more later on, and he was another individual who folks really liked the ceiling. He hadn't played a ton, but he moves pretty well for an offensive lineman, a guy his size, and he really put together a really good 2019. I thought he ended that year particularly well. If you go back and watch the tape, I know Michigan got the butts handed to him by Ohio State, but Jalen Mayfield played pretty well in that game. He played pretty well in the bowl game against Alabama. So he was really riding high coming out of 2019, and I think that was one of the reasons why he decided originally to opt out of the 2020 season when the Big Ten first kind of called, suspended play in the fall. But he came back. He played a little, same as Quiddy, came back and played a little bit, obviously, last year in 2020. I don't think he necessarily hurt himself, but I don't know if he helped himself either. And I think that was more maybe a byproduct of Michigan's just inefficiency and struggles on the offensive side of the ball. But I think Jalen's more or less, his draft stock was more hurt because by just the number of quarterbacks that are anticipated to being taken. He's an offensive lineman, so offensive linemen aren't necessarily the first ones looked at, the top of the board. So I think he's just kind of a byproduct of that. It's a possibility he sneaks in late, but at this point, it's looking like more like an early second-round pick for him. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes, anywhere from 28 to 32. We could hear his name called late. If a team comes up, they have a need for an offensive lineman and they really like him. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the first guys off the board on Friday night.
Well, this is a deep draft for receivers. Nico Collins is one of a large and talented group. Is this where sitting out last year could push Nico down in the draft, Aaron?
I do, yeah. In fact, I asked ESPN's Mel Kiper about him, about a month ago now, whether his decision to opt out hurt his stock. And Mel really thought it probably didn't help him. You mentioned the deep receivers class. It was deep last year, and I think that was one of the reasons why Nico decided originally to come back and play in 2020. He wanted another year to put some film on tape. He thought maybe he can get some more he could lead the team again in receptions and touchdowns and receiving yards. And then obviously the Big Ten pulled the plug in the season. Nico kind of found himself in a conundrum here. He originally opted out. He signed with an agent, Drew Rosenhaus, and kind of got the NFL draft ball rolling. Now, come to find out, we spoke to him, I think, last month before Michigan's Pro Day, but he said he wanted to come back and play last year. He just couldn't. By the time he had signed with an agent and kind of got the ball rolling, it was the NCAA rules didn't allow for that. So, yeah, I do think him not playing in 2020 hurt more or less just from a memory standpoint. There's just no film of him from 2020. Mm-hmm. So NFL, staff, they kind of have to go off of 2019 and what he did there. I do think Nico helped himself by getting that Senior Bowl invite in January. So he was able to put himself in front of NFL scouts again and remind them who he is and what he does. And he's unique talent, I think, by his size. I mean, we're starting to see more smaller receivers, more quick guys that are getting drafted early, where Nico is that big, tall, down the field threat that more mm-hmm. prototypical NFL receiver that the NFL likes. So I think he'll get a look. It probably won't be early. Again, you mentioned the stacked receivers class. I'm looking right now probably late second round, early third round for Nico Collins.
Well, many of us were somewhat surprised when Cameron McGrone decided to enter the draft. Mel Kiper says he's one of the most underrated prospects in this draft starting tonight. He seems to be a wild card kind of a pick, though, doesn't he, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by him just because we spoke to him last month, and it sounded like he had his mind made up about entering the draft after this season, before the season even began. He said he sat down with Don Brown after the 2019 season about his future and the like, and I guess the decision was already made that he had to play one more year in college just to become eligible for the draft. but they felt like he was ready to come out. He had a productive 2019 season. If you go back and look at the stats and look at his film, he was pretty impressive. I remember a lot of us coming out of that 19 season thinking, wow, he was the future linebacker. He reminded me a little bit of Devin Bush with this straight line speed of the ball. He got to the ball no problem. And then 2020 happened. He played last year, but he wasn't anything particularly great. I think that would perhaps maybe more of a byproduct of Michigan's struggles defensively. He didn't have much help around him. There wasn't a ton of depth. Michigan just had trouble getting the football. Teams that kind of scouted them. So, I think his stock maybe took a hit a little bit, but at the same token, too, I think some NFL teams might be throwing, that 2020 season out based on, the COVID and everything else. So, McGrone is an interesting prospect. He's got good straight line speed. He struggles at times when teams try to go outside and kind of change things up on him. So, Kuiper really liked him. He thinks he'll be probably more of a mid-round guy, 4th, 5th round. But again, he's got that Michigan name value. He's got good tape from 2019. It wouldn't surprise me if a team takes a flyer on him and takes a good look and really likes him and takes him middle of the draft.
Well, another player I'm keeping an eye on. I haven't heard or read much about him lately as far as his draft status or where he's going to go. Is Ambry Thomas. What do you hear about him? Yeah,
he's another guy kind of like Nico who opted out obviously of 2020, and I think not playing hurt his stock. He again, just like Nico and maybe like Cam McGrone, I thought he was very productive in 2019. He'd really kind of come on toward the end of the season. He was another guy who was debating about leaving the NFL draft after 19, decided to come back, but then the coronavirus pandemic hit, and given his health issues and his decisions and the like, he decided to opt out. I do think that kind of hurt him a little bit. Mel Kiper acknowledged that same thing, and Tom McShay to the same degree as well. Thomas, I think, needed to play in 2020 just to kind of solidify and show NFL teams that he can put together back-to-back productive seasons. Didn't do it, but I don't think that's going to necessarily hurt him from getting. I think he'll get drafted. It's just a matter of where at this point. It's looking like probably late rounds. That wouldn't surprise me if it's 4th, 5th, 6th round at this point. He's in a conundrum too, kind of like last year with Laverne Hill, where all Ambry Thomas knows is that press man coverage, which is fine in the college game, but when you get to the NFL, you got to diversify and learn to play more zone and the like. So I think Ambry still has some learning to do. I think if and when he gets drafted, it's probably going to take him some time to get going. But he's got really good ball skills, as we all saw. He's got good speed. He has bulked up a little bit. I think that's one of the bigger knocks against him is just his size. He's a little bit short, and he was skinny, but he put on some weight in 2019. I saw him at the Senior Bowl this past January. He bulked up a little bit, so I think that helps him. But again, not playing in 2020 certainly didn't do him any favors.
Well, you mentioned that when it's all said and done, possibly 6 or 7 Michigan players will go in this draft. Who are the others that you're thinking are going?
Yeah, there's 2 names that I would not surprise me that go late. Ben Mason for one. I mean, he's ranked as the number 1 fullback in the draft. Now, I know that doesn't mean much in today's NFL just because the fullback isn't utilized a ton anymore. But Ben Mason's one of those guys who is a Jim Harbaugh guy. He's tough. He can do a lot of things. He can play special teams, and I think that's what's going to get him on an NFL team. Remember last year, I was one of the guys who didn't really think Jordan Glasgow was going to get drafted. He ended up going. He's very, very much reminds me of Ben Mason, a guy who can do a lot of things. Jim Harbaugh will give his stamp of approval at the NFL level, so I think Ben Mason does probably latch onto a team late. And then another guy I'm watching, Chris Evans. We talked a lot about him early in his Michigan career. He came in, was very productive his freshman, sophomore years. Since then, he hasn't played a ton of football. He was suspended for all of 19, came back last year, but he had to share carries with 3 other running backs. So I think he has some convincing to do with NFL teams that he can still be that productive back. That his blip in his college career was just that. But I think he has enough athleticism and like Ben Mason, he has some versatility. He catches the ball in the backfield, which I think will help him, whether that's running back or perhaps on special teams. But it would not surprise me if Chris Evans gets picked late as well.
Another 2 players I'm sort of interested in seeing what happens with are Quinn Nordin, who, as we know, has that incredible leg, but he was in and out, very inconsistent. And there's also a lot of talk about long snapper Cameron Cheeseman, who I think is the highest rated long snapper in the draft.
Yeah, Cheeseman. I think of the two, I think Cheeseman would maybe be the first one, the one to go above Nordine, just because he's that specialty guy, and you're right, he is the number one long snapper in the draft. So if there's a need there for a team late, I could see them using a pick on him. But typically with special team specialists like these guys, they're rarely, if ever, drafted. You really got to be a special talent to be drafted. So that's why I think if one is taken, it would be Cheeseman. If not, it wouldn't surprise me if both end up going undrafted. But certainly they'll probably be signed as priority free agents, given a look. Nordine's in a crutch because most NFL rosters only carry one kicker, maybe two if they're lucky. And so he's got to kind of differentiate himself as that guy. He's got the strength. We've seen him boot 50-yard field goals often. We've seen him do it a lot. But you're right, just like you said, inconsistency is an issue with him. He's got to be able to put it together and find himself here. Otherwise, he wouldn't stick long with the NFL team.
Well, as we said, the NFL draft gets underway tonight. We're recording on Thursday morning, so we will all watch that with interest. But in other news, Aaron, Matt Dudek left Michigan in the last week or so, and former Michigan lineman Courtney Morgan was named the Director of Player Personnel. Give us your take on that move, Aaron.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising, but I do think it was needed. I think Michigan's recruiting needed just a kind of a shakeup. And that's not to say it hasn't been bad. I mean, when Dudek came in, they were very good about keeping things stable. 4 of his 5 years here, they had top 15 recruiting classes. They had 2 top 10 classes. So I don't think he did a bad job, but I think you could certainly look at and criticize it's just a lack of organization. I think they're all over the map in some degrees with recruiting. They didn't really have much of a straight line plan. It was kind of rough shot all over the country. So I think this kind of changes things up. We'll see where Courtney Morgan goes. He has an extensive background on the West Coast. He comes to Michigan from Fresno State. He was director of player personnel at Fresno State, at San Jose State. He was at UCLA for a little bit, so he's got extensive ties out there, which I think should help. Now, keep in mind, in Michigan, they have recruited the West Coast. They've had some success out there, so it's not like they're not out there. But Courtney Morgan does bring a familiar face and kind of more of a knowledge of the program. I mean, he played here for 4 years. He knows what being at Michigan is like. He'll have ties. He has ties here in Michigan, the Detroit area. So I think a shakeup was needed. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. I think we won't really feel his impact, I think, for maybe a draft class or two. It's going to take some time to get going. But I think it's a good move. It was, Dudek did a fine job, as I said, but, they needed, I think, a breath of fresh air in there.
Yeah, the timing is very interesting. Right now, I think Michigan has moved up to number 16 in the 2022 class in the last week. It varies by recruiting service. But the recruiting dead period is ending, and a lot of big-time prospects have Michigan visits scheduled. That's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, visits, in-person visits can begin, June 1st, which, it's going to be the first time in about 15 months it's going to be allowed. And for a school of Michigan's caliber, it's needed. Michigan can recruit on its name alone, but I think where Michigan can beat a lot of their similar programs is, the facilities. You can take a recruit in the big house and show them what it's like to be there and play football inside of, a massive complex. The Ann Arbor campus and community is beautiful. There are a lot of good things that they can show off. And I think that's where it helps Michigan in recruiting. So, yeah, that's going to open the door and help things, I think, for them. They do have a new staff. But as you mentioned, Courtney Morgan. I'm sure Morgan will be bringing in some new guys as well. So it's going to be acclimation period for everyone. But I think you talked about earlier a sense of return of normalcy. I think the in-person recruiting June 1st is a step toward that.
Yeah, I think a lot of these kids are tired of the phone calls, the emails, and the Zoom recruiting. So a lot of analysts seem to think that with the dead period ending and a lot of the top players now visiting campuses, that June's going to be a huge commitment month there. And do you think that's the case too?
Yeah, I think you got a lot of kids that have been on, you mentioned the Zoom calls, and they've gotten the virtual visits where, staffs have taken videos of buildings and facilities and the like. But I think getting them up here to Ann Arbor and on campus and the facilities just kind of confirms what some may already be thinking. And shoot, it may sway some too. As I mentioned, the facilities are immaculate. Michigan, they're some of the best in the country, so that can, I think, only help Michigan at this point. So yeah, it should help them. You mentioned the ranking with the recruiting class. They've got some work to do. They've got to fill some holes. But yeah, it's certainly I think a breath of fresh air for Michigan to kind of get things back to normal, so to speak.
You would have to think that with the big changeover on the coaching staff in the off season, with recruiting being the main reason, the expectation is we need to start landing or hitting on some of these highly rated recruits, Aaron. I mean, that's in part why Jim made the changes, isn't it?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they've had some successes we've seen, but like I said, it's been very inconsistent, kind of all over the board. It's been kind of random at times. They've missed on some big guys. They've failed with some guys they brought in. So yeah, I think it's time now. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's entering year 7. It's we talk about do or die, but I think he's got a year or two here to prove that he can get Michigan to the top of the level, top of the Big Ten in that Ohio State level. And if they can't do it in the next couple of years, it's going to be interesting. He's brought in some younger guys, more energetic recruiters, some guys who have had success on other levels and in other places. But I think it's at the same time, I think it's going to take him some time. I don't think it's realistic for anyone to expect this coaching staff to come in and hit home runs maybe right away, both on the field and off. But I do think at some point here, the next 12 months, the momentum needs to start, heading in the right direction for Michigan. Otherwise, as many of your listeners, know, I mean, frustration is there. I mean, I get it. I think the program feels it. I think Jim Harbaugh knows it. And things need to start changing. Otherwise, you wonder if Jim Harbaugh really is the guy.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's out there. I think at this point, after 7 years, we all agree. And given COVID, a horrible showing on the field last year, and then wholesale changes to the coaching staff. At this point, do you have any idea what we should expect from Michigan this fall?
That's a good question. I do think they'll take some steps forward on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, remember, we're entering year 3 of Josh Gaddis. They have a lot of his type of guys in place. I'm really bullish on the offensive line. I think they could be very good this year, and they've got some playmakers. I mean, they've got some receivers now that have been around for a few years. I think they got a talented group of running backs. They got to put it all together, and I think if Michigan's going to be successful this fall, it's because of their offense. They need to take a step forward and kind of start, clicking and being that Josh Gaddis offense that he was talking about year 1. The defense, I think, is a different story. I think it's going to take some time. I remember, Josh's first year in 19 when he came in, he had some talented guys on the offensive side of the ball, but it took them half a season to get going, just kind of gel with one another and get everything down. I think that's what you're going to see on the defensive side of the ball this year. Mike McDonald's bringing in the new scheme. We aren't entirely sure what it's going to look like, but you're going to have some new starters here on the defensive side of the ball. Some guys are kind of still getting their feet underneath them. So I'm bullish on the offense. I think they can be very good, but the defense is going to struggle, and I think that's a reality that Michigan fans need to kind of come to grips with. I'm not expecting them to compete for a Big Ten title this fall. I don't think they should be taking a step backwards either. So it's going to be interesting to follow. I do think they need to show some signs that things are moving in the right direction. And if they can do that, then I think 2022 could be a very interesting fall.
Yeah, I think we all agree that it is going to be a very interesting year. When you look at ESPN's power rankings, I think Michigan was number 40. The expectations from a lot of the analysts and experts are not that high for this team. And I think for the first time in the long time I've been covering University of Michigan football, a lot of the fans that I talk to have lower expectations for this team, and that might be really helpful come October and November, Aaron.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think interest isn't as maybe palpable as it is under normal circumstances, and I can tell you firsthand, talking to fans, whether it's over email or social media, they're cautiously waiting for things to change, and I think between success of the other teams, whether it's basketball or women's basketball, they've had some other reasons to kind of escape. But yeah, they're waiting. We'll see. You're right. I think being under the radar should help. Whether it does or not, I don't know. I think Ohio State could still be very good. I'm curious to see what they end up doing at quarterback. You've got some teams on the rise in the Big Ten, so it's going to be an interesting, fall. I'm not ruling Michigan out at this point, but they've got a lot of work ahead of them. It's going to take some time, and I think it's patience. Even in year 7, as hard as maybe some folks want to hear, it's going to be needed this fall.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and I know that's not what people want to hear, but that's the reality of where we are after 7 years. So hang in there. Final question for you, Aaron. This is the one I'm still getting the most from fans right now. Will the big house be full this year, or will there be limited attendance? And I think Ward Manuel wishes he could answer that question right now, but it is still a very murky situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in an ideal situation, Ward would want to fill it. I mean, not just to appease the fan base, the folks that want to be there, but to help the coffers of the athletic department. I know they're hurting financially, and they could certainly use a full crowd. But I think it's going to be a contingent on state law and what the University of Michigan wants and kind of dictates. At the very least, I could see 40 or 50% full, but it would not surprise me if things change here for the better in the next month or two. And I think there's reason to believe that they will. Vaccines are plentiful now. Appointments are being made. Almost half the state's been vaccinated. So I think, by the time early September rolls around, I think there's a good chance, if not full, we're close to it. We'll see. Things have to improve, and they are. Like all of us, we can be cautiously optimistic given everything that's going on. Absolutely.
We have plenty of time for things to change for the better, so I guess keep positive thoughts, and we should learn sometime midsummer, late summer, what's going to happen. Here with us today on our show has been football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Aaron. Not the season right now, but that's not far away, so the next time we visit, it will be probably during fall camp, so we look forward to that next visit. In the meantime, take care of yourself and be safe.
Thanks, Mike. Always a blast to join you.
On Quick Hits today, number 19 softball, 24-5 on the season, hits the road this weekend for a 4-game set against Penn State in State College. The series kicks off at 5 p.m. on Friday, continues with a 1 p.m. doubleheader on Saturday, and wraps up with a noon slate on Sunday. All 4 games will be streamed live on the Big Ten Network Plus. Baseball, 19-9 on the season in their Big Ten-only schedule, takes to the road for the Northwestern Pod in Evanston on Friday through Sunday, 4 games against Northwestern and Illinois. The Wolverines will open the 4-game set on Friday with a 3 p.m. game against the host Wildcats. On Saturday, U of M will face Northwestern at 10:30 a.m. and Illinois at 3 p.m. Michigan will close the weekend with a matchup against the Illini on Sunday. All 4 games will be streamed live on Big Ten Network Plus. Once again, a reminder that beginning in May, we are on our summer schedule of 2 shows a month. We resume weekly programming in August when we return to begin previewing another football season. So make a note, our next show will air on May 12th. That will do it for this week's program. Thanks again to football beat writer Aaron McMann for being our guest. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!